All right, good evening. Daf Yomi sponsored for the week by the Kahal Yereim Board of Directors in honor of Rabbi Gislason. We're sponsored, Daf Yomi sponsored in honor of you all week for your birthday, which is today, December 30th, I'm told. This just in. And just handed to me, right? Kahal Yereim is blessed to have such a dynamic, special Rav leading our kid. Goes on for pages. I'm gonna summarize it down, right? So have such a dynamic, special Rav leading the Kila, and we're blessed to work with you. This most incredible endeavor you have created, as we at Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi like to say, bis 120 Jahr. That's
Amen.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you. All right, especially for the movable background that we use for this farm. It looks very real. Okay, Gemara. We're at the Gemara. We had learned that the rule was that if the korban, if the meat of the ola is not able to be brought on the mizbeach, then the kohanim don't get the skin. Right, that's the key. And the hide is valuable, so people like their hides. So Tana Rabbanan and our rabbis on Olas Ish, the pasuk that our source was Olas Ish. It has to be the Ola of a person. Prat Olas Hektish. That means an Ola that belongs to Hektish, we do not give the skin to a Kohen. How does an Ola belong to Hektish? We're going to have a few potential suggestions on how that could be. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Prat Olas Gerim. If there is an Ola that belongs to a convert, then that's what the pasuk is saying. The Kohen doesn't get that skin. And we'll try to figure out why that would be. Okay, so let's discuss what that means. My prat le'olas hektish. What does this mean that we're going to exempt the Ola that belongs to hektish? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, prat le'ola haba min hamosaros. We're going to exclude the hides from the korban olos that are brought from the extras. What are extras? So if we have a asham, korban asham, that is ineligible to be effective for its owner, there are some examples. For example, let's say the asham, the owner dies. Well, now what are you going to do with it? So the answer is you can't bring it as an asham because there's no owner that it's supposed to go for. You have to sell it. You have to let it get a blemish, sell it. And then with that money, you buy korban olas. Right. Also, you could have a circumstance where somebody has a temura for an asham, right? That also you could have, right? So in all of those circumstances where you would sell the animal after it gets a blemish, buy a korban ola with that money, that ola, the hide does not go to the kohen. So, hani chalaman da'amar mosoros lenidvas tzibor azli.
What it is about Pesach?
So why would that be? The reason why that would be is because this goes nicely according to the opinion that the ola that we're purchasing from funds that were the sale of this asham, is that ola a public offering or a personal offering? So the pasuk had said that only personal offerings, the money, the olas ish, the personal offerings, that ola goes to the hide goes to the kohen. A korban, a public offering, does not. And so if this is a public offering, why would it be public? Because essentially we're taking this doesn't really belong, this oil doesn't belong to anybody. We've got this extra money, and so therefore we're going to use this extra money in order to be able to keep the mizbeach always in operation, and it's classified as public funds. And therefore the hide does not go to the kohen. But according to the opinion that says that it really is, this is Rabbi Elazar's opinion in Mesechus Temura, that this is really an individual's offering. So what would be the reason why the ola that comes for this individual is the ola that comes for this individual the hide doesn't go to the kohen. It's the personal offering just as much. So the answer is Keda'amar Rava, because the pasuk says, right? It's like Rava says in Mesechus Yuma. Pasuk says Va'esh al mizbeach va'arach the fire on the mizbeach, and you have to set upon it ha'ola, the ola. Okay, so it says the ola. It doesn't say va'arach al ola, you shall place the ola upon this fire. It says ha'ola. So what is the extra hay there for? It's ola rishona. So this is coming to tell us that this ola that's talking about in this pasuk in Vayikra Hay is the first ola of the day. right? It is the Ola Rishona. It is the very first one. That's the Tamid Shel Shachar. That's the morning offering, and that tells us that no korbanos were brought before this Ola of the morning. Every day the korban tamid, the very first thing that was brought was the morning. So now that we understand that when there's an extra hay, the word Ola, Ha-Ola, the extra hay, comes as a drasha, Hachanami, here too. In Vayikra Zayin, Pasuk Ches, which is a parak later, which is V'hakohen hamakriv es olas ish, or ha'olah, the kohen who brings the olah of the person, and then it says ha'olah, it's olah rishona. So it's only an olah, the first olah. Again, we're going to use that same the hay to tell me it's the first one. What does that mean? It's the first one. That means it's an original olah. This animal was originally came because somebody donated an olah. That's the one that the kohen gets a skin for. However, if this olah came about because somebody was chayev in asham, and then things went sideways, and now he's got extra money. Now we had to sell the animal, and now we're going to buy from that money. Olah, that's not an olah rishona. That's not the first olah. Therefore, that's not going to be an olah that the kohen is going to get the hides for. Okay. Another potential understanding of the phrase Olas hektish, a olah that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, where the Kohanim would not get the hides. Rabbi Ivo Omar Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Ivo says Rabbi Yanai prat lematfis olah lebedek habayis. Let's say somebody says he's got his korban olah. It's already got what we call kedushas haguf. That's what he can open it. It's kedushas, he has kedushas haguf, right? He has kedushas haguf. That means that the animal is being brought as a korban. Then he says that this olah is lebedek habayis for the sake of donated for the sake of the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash as well. So, what happens? So, leman damar kodshe bedek habayis tofsi midoraisa. According to the opinion that says that the kodshim of the bedek habayis is a Torah rule, right? That the kedusha of the bedek habayis. When somebody donates something as the kedusha for the bedek habayis, that means for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, it has a Torah quality to it. So now that he does that,
he's like the caretaker of the basement.
It's for the upkeep. Well, I mean, the animal's not going to be the caretaker, right? But you're going to give this to them so that you could sell the money for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Well, now if this works on a Torah level, this animal that's an olah no longer belongs to an individual. It now belongs to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, it's no longer in the category of olas ish, an individual's offering, and it's no longer in that category. The kohen cannot get the hide. El afilu mandamar lo tafsi.
How does that work? If somebody is donating,
It's donating and already done.
makdish their thing and saying
That's already hektish, right? He's double
Should be
makdish.
an ola. They're saying they're being makdish it, saying it should be an ola.
Sounds like it's the other way around. It was an olah first, and then he says, "But I want it to be for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash as well." Yeah, apparently so. So if bedek habayis works from a Torah level, well, that means his statement has some impact. It has some effect. What is it doing? Well, it can't remove the kedushas haguf, but what it does is it removes this korban from being a personal offering. It's now not a person's offering. It's now an olah that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. It's a korban olah that the Beis Hamikdash owns. And if you have a korban that the Beis Hamikdash owns, the kohen can't get the hide because it has to be a person's korban for the kohen to get the hide. That's number
But
one.
it's no longer a korban.
It's still korban.
That's the whole point of
You can't unmakdish it, right? So the bedek habayis just means that you're going to use the proceeds for the upkeep. So you can't because there are no proceeds because it's an olah, so it's going to get completely burned. But what it does do is change its status from being Shlomo's korban to the Beis Hamikdash's korban. Right? It actually just becomes the Beis Hamikdash's korban, and now they're bringing it as a korban. What's practical difference is the hide. Can't give it to the kohen. That's one point of view. But even feeling lan da'amar lo tafsi, even according to the position that this designation of bedek habayis it's not effective. It doesn't work. Hanimili basar. That's only as far as the skin goes of or tafis, but I'm sorry, as far as the meat goes, because the meat's already kodesh. That's really what's bothering you, right? That the olah is already kodesh. It already belongs to the mizbeach. How can you designate it? Okay, so then what's this person doing? He's designating whatever parts are not supposed to be burned on the mizbeach for bedek habayis, and that is the hide. So the hide is going to become sold for the bedek habayis because he can do that, so he can donate it there. So therefore, that's what we mean that the hide doesn't go to the kohen. Either that the hide now belongs to an animal that isn't olas ish, therefore the kohen doesn't get it, or the hide itself is actually now donated as part of Bedek Habayis. Okay, v'chein Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav Ravua. That's what Rav Nachman says in Rav Ravua. Prat la'olah haba min hamosaros. That he explains that the brisa, which says except for the olas hakodesh. So Rav Nachman says in Rav Ravua that the explanation for that phrase is option number one, that it means we're going to exempt the olah that comes from the extra money that was used when we sold blemished asham offerings. Amar li Rav Hamnuna Rav Nachman. Rav Hamnuna says to Rav Nachman, Keman, who is that? Ke Rabbi Yehuda. There you're trying to explain that's Rabbi Yehuda's, that because that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Ha-haderbe, Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind. He doesn't even hold that way anymore. The Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Shisha linedava, there were these shofros. They had these tzedakah boxes, and they were shaped like horns, right? So they had wide tops so you could put the money in, and they would hold they had 13 of them. They had for different korbanos for different purposes. 6 of them had labels on them that they were for donations. So, and you were supposed to be able to, what were the donations? That way you would be able to drop money in there, and the kohen would take money from them and buy olos as donations, donated olos on the Mizbeach. So that's 6 of them. Le'olah haba min hamosaros. And they were there for the olos that they would purchase from the proceeds of the ashams that had blemishes, that had gotten ruined, and therefore that's what they were supposed to turn them into olos. Shelo yehu kohanim zakaim ba'ora. And the kohanim would not get the hides from those korbanos. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. And that's what sounds like Rav Nachman is suggesting is the rule. But Rav Hamnuna says to Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind. Look, read the rest of the brisa. Amar Rav Nechemia says, V'amri la Rabbi Shimon, and some say it was Rabbi Shimon who said to him, Im kain bitalta midrasho shel Yehoyada HaKohen. You have nullified the drasha of Yehoyada HaKohen, that Yehoyada HaKohen, who is the Kohen Gadol in the first Beis HaMikdash era, he made the following drasha. This is a very early drasha. Titania, we learn in a brisa. Zem midrash darash Yehoyada HaKohen. This is the drush that Yehoyada, one of the very early drushos, Yehoyada HaKohen said, Asham hu, Asham laHashem. Pasuk in Vayikra Hey Perek Yud Tas. It is an asham, asham. It is a guilt offering to Hashem. So it means that sounds like the asham belongs to Hashem. It doesn't say the asham was laKohen. It says asham laHashem. So, but you can't say that because the pasuk says kachatas ka'asham. They have the same rule, and the Kohen, and it says that the Kohen gets it. So how are you going to explain the two different contrasting psukim?
I don't get it.
I see. Kol sheba mishum chatos mishum asham. Anything which came because of a chatos or an asham, meaning the extra leftovers of a chatos or extra leftovers from the asham, right? So it has a lahashem principle and a lakom principle. Yilakach bo olos. Then you have to take that extra and you have to buy olos with it. Habasar l'shem ve'orak l'kohanim, and you split it. The meat goes to Hashem and the hide goes to the Kohanim. Okay, so Yehoyada Kohen makes a clear drasha. The Kohanim do get the hides in those cases. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda had to change his mind. So Rav Nachman, how could you hold like Rabbi Yehuda when Rabbi Yehuda had to be confronted with the drush of Yehoyada HaKohen? He must have backtracked from that. So these extra animals that are bought from the money, the proceeds from the Asham offerings, the Kohanim do get those hides. So Rav Nachman says back, Amar le Elamar b'may mokim. Okay, fine, fair. How do you explain it? How do you understand which is the case that the Kohen doesn't get the hides? So we already had one answer, right? The answer that we had was whether he makes a Bedek Habayis out of he makes a designation of Bedek Habayis on his Korban Olah. But he says, I actually have a different way. So he says, Amar Le, he says, Mokimna Le b'makdish nechasov. He says, I'm holding, imagine a circumstance. Somebody says, I donate all of my possessions to the Beis HaMikdash. And this goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yeshua. Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah Maseches Shkalim. Hamakdish nechasov, right? Person says, I donate all my possessions for the sake of the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash.
Then we got
The hayu bahen behemos haruyos legabim mizbech. Amongst his possessions, there were kosher animals that were appropriate to give as korbanos. So, zechar munekevos. He has male animals. He's got female animals. Rabbi Eliezer, what happens to those? Rabbi Eliezer says, zechar mimachru l'tzarcheolos. Rabbi Eliezer says, you take the male animals, you sell them to people who need a korban olah. And thereby you have the proceeds, and that goes to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Nekevos, you take the female animals, you sell it to people who need a korban shlomim. Why don't you sell the female animals for an olah? Because, trick question, there are no olas that are female, as we already saw. So you take the female animals, you sell those for people who need shlomim. Udmehem, and then the money that you make from those proceeds, yiplu im shar nechasim lebedek habayis, go with the rest of the money, and they go to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Fulfilling what the person said, I want all of my possessions to go to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, if you've got animals that are perfectly good, and you designate them for the service of the Beis Hamikdash, they themselves become korbanos. So, zecharim atzmam yikruvu olos. The male animals themselves are brought as korban olos. Unekevos, the female animals, yimachru l'tzarchei shlamim. So those have to get sold to people who need a korban shlamim. V'yavi b'demehan olos, and then you take the money that you purchased from, you get from those, and you buy more olos. Ushar nechasim yiplu lebedek habayis. Then the rest of the money, not the money for these korbanos, goes to upkeep the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so now Vafilu Rabbi Yeshua. Now, so Rabbi Yeshua says that these items belong to they're brought as korbanos. Now Rabbi Yeshua says De Amar Adam Cholek Hekdesho, that which he says that a person, what he's suggesting is, I've donated all my property. It doesn't mean that all of your property goes to one type of hekdesh or the other. You could split it up. The things that are for korbanos are for korbanos. The things that are for upkeep, the money, right? You could sell the guy's jewelry, and that goes for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. But the animals themselves are kodah. He divides it up. Says this has what we say kedushas haguf, physical kedusha, so it becomes a korban. And these items have kedushas mamon, have financial benefit, and you sell them for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yeshua says just because a person said I donate everything doesn't mean he donates everything the same way. He says that honey mili basar. That's as far as the flesh of the animal is concerned. Aval or tafis, but the skin of the animal, the hide of the animal, that still goes to the Beis Hamikdash as bedek, as upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't get turned into a regular olah because he donated everything, including the hide. So therefore, that's his explanation. He says that's the definition of the circumstance where the Kohen does not get the hide. Okay. Now, the other potential version was, the other potential item that the Kohen doesn't get the hide from was Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that he says prat la'olas gerim, an olah of converts, so the Kohen doesn't get those hides. Amalei Rav Simai bar Chilkai l'Ravina. Rav Simai bar Chilkai says to Ravina, Atu ger lavi ishu. What are you talking about? A ger is not a person. Why wouldn't the Kohen get it? So Amar Lei, so he said, Prat leger shemeis ve'in lo yorshin. We're talking about a circumstance where the olah belonged to a convert, but the convert died. Normally, when a person dies and he has a outstanding korban, his children bring it. Right. If this ger has no relatives, who's going to bring it? So the answer is, under that circumstance, it gets brought anyway, but since it doesn't belong to any individual person, the hide does not go to the Kohen. Okay, so that's our circumstance. Tano Rabbanan, our rabbis learned as follows. Olas ish, ainli ella olas ish. Right, so it says, that pasuk tells us, the olah that belongs to a person, that means that it only means a regular olah that belongs to a person that goes to the Kohen. Ainli ella olas ish, elas gerem noshim va'avodim minayin. How about people that wouldn't be under this word ish? Maybe converts, maybe women, maybe servants.
But if they're convert men, there's still be ish, no?
Yes, that's what we had just said, right? So we have the Kesef Mishnah takes out that word for that reason. We just said gerim are ish, so why would we write ish here? So good question whether that word is actually in the Gemara or not, but probably for that reason that right. Rashi also in his Dibur Maskal Olas, he takes that word out as well. Rashi removes that word, so that's why it's in our Gemara. I said it, but Yehuda caught me, and so yes, Rashi removes that word for that purpose. Okay, so now Talmud Lomar or ha'olah, right? The word ha'olah, the skin of the olah. Of course, it's the skin of the olah. That's the skin we're talking about in the pasuk. Why did you have to write ha'olah? So it's to tell me riba, to tell me that it includes also that the Kohen gets the hide of the olah that belongs to women and servants. Im kain matam lomar olas ish. So if that's true, so then why did the pasuk write olas ish? Right? Just it sounds like it's excluding them. Olah also leish. The answer is it's an olah that belongs to a person. Right? There is an owner. That's what it means. Not that the owner has to be a man, but there has to be an owner. Also, it excludes if the olah is not valid. Right? Let's say the olah was slaughtered as pigul, or that the owner or the Kohen had in mind that he was going to offer it outside of its proper place. So now that korban is puzzle, you can't bring the meat on the mizbeach. We said if you can't bring the meat on the mizbeach, the Kohanim don't get the hide either. So shelo yu akonim zakaim ba'ora. In that circumstance, the Kohanim do not get the hide. Yachol shani marbe shenishchata shelo lishma. I might think that also includes. What if I do the korban olah and I don't do it for the sake of a korban olah, which we said then doesn't count for the owner? So I might think that the hide does not go to the Kohen in that circumstance. Also there, also labam, because it doesn't go work for the owner. Lo yehu kohanim zakaim ba'ora. So the Kohanim shouldn't get the hide either. Talmud lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says or ha'olah, the skin, the hide of the olah, mikol makom, that there's another circumstance the Kohanim do get it that you might have thought not, and that is the circumstance where the hide, the korban is valid, but not l'shem badlim, it still goes to the Kohen. Okay, like consistent with our Mishnah. Then, or ha'olah, ainli ella or ha'olah. So pasuk says that the hide of the olah goes to the Kohanim. I might think that means only the Kohanim get the hide of olos offerings, not the other offerings. Oros kache kachim minayin. How do I know to include the hide of other korbanos as well? Talmud lomar, therefore the pasuk says, or ha'olah, the hide of the olah asher hikriv, that he brings as a korban, meaning any of the korbanos as well. Yochel shani marbe af kachim kalim. I might think that the Kohanim also get the hide of the kachim kalim. Not true. Talmud lomar olah. That's why the pasuk says olah. Ma olah kachim kachim. It's only going to be of the other korbanos that are similar to olah. Just like an olah is in the category of kachim kachim. Av kol kachim kachim. So too the Kohanim only get the hide of kachim kachim. Rabbi Yishmael says. He says it from a kal v'chomer, not from the extra words in the pasuk. Rabbi Yishmael says or ha'olah. That says the pasuk says that the Kohen gets the skin of the olah. Ainli ella ha'olah. It tells me only the olah. Oros kadche kachim minayin, the hide of the kadche kachim. How do I know to include that? V'dinu, there's a logic. Uma olah shelo zachu biv sarah. If the Kohanim don't get the meat, right, zachu ba'ora, but they still get the hide. Kadche kachim, the rest of the korbanos shezachu biv sarah, where they do get the meat, no din shezachu ba'ora. For sure, they should get the hide, right? Kohanim have more benefit, they should for sure get the hide. So mizbeach yochiach. I'll say, well, wait, take a look at the mizbeach here. Shezachu b'basar v'lo zacha ba'or. The mizbeach for the gets the korban it gets the flesh, but it doesn't get the hide. So maybe in the other korbanos the Kohen gets the flesh, but it doesn't get the hide also. Yeah, but you can't learn from the mizbeach because mal mizbeach shekin lo zacha b'miktas. The mizbeach never gets the hide. The Torah never says the mizbeach has anything to do with the hide. Therefore, there's no kal v'chomer to say since it gets the meat, it gets the hide. But tomar b'kolim shezacha b'miktas, which is not the case by the Kohanim, where the Torah does specify the Kohanim get the hide. Therefore, since we know the Kohen get the hide when it comes to the olah, it makes sense to apply a kal v'chomer that they should get the hide by all the other korbanos as well. Okay, Rabbi Omer. Rabbi says, "Kol atzmo lo hutzrachnu el or ha'ola bilvad." You don't really need any sort of limud at all to tell me that the Kohanim get the hide for other korbanos, right? His goes even one step further. I don't need any limud. I don't need kal v'chomer. I don't need nothing, right? I just think that the olah is the exception. I might not have thought the Kohanim get the hide of the olah. That's why the pasuk needs to tell me, because shebechol makom ha'or mahalech achar basar. The rule is, who gets the hide? The answer is whoever gets the meat. That's the general rule. Paraman Israfim, Masir Nisraf. And take a look, for example, you've got the bulls and the goats from the inside of the Beis HaMikdash offerings. What happens to those? You're supposed to burn them. So what happens to the hide? Hey, the hide also gets burned. Hein ve'orosehem nisrafim imayim, right? Since the animals are burned, the hide gets burned with them. It goes together. Chatas v'asham. Take a look at the korban chatas, the korban asham, ziv cheshamei tzibor, and also the korbanos of shlamim of the public, a public korban shlamim. So matan ala kohen, the kohen gets to eat them. So therefore, ratzu mafshitin osam, lo ratzu ochlin osam al gabi oran. So if they want to eat it, they can eat anything in the animal. So if they want to, they can remove the hide and keep the hide for themselves. But if they want to eat the whole thing with the skin, they could do that too. It's theirs. The point is meat and skin, they go together.
Look at get rid of all the fur and hair and whatever else.
I would hope so. It's not as tasty. If you go to a barbecue and they have the hair attached. Huh?
I've seen the
Do they? Have you? You've said you've seen it, right?
hair on the chicken wings.
Oh, right. So chicken, you see it more. I don't know if there's such a thing as, I don't know what pork bellies, if that's really pork hides or skins or things, pork chips, I don't know.
When Michelle comes,
It's like eating leather, no?
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I would say gross. But right, we had discussed things that were edible on the Mizbeach or that not edible. We said the skin is edible al yedei dechak, right? And some parts of the skin is edible, right? In some parts, right?
Right.
I wouldn't say like the hide of a cow is, but maybe if you have a goat, right? Good question. Kachim kalim. So when you've got the lesser korbanos, the lesser group. So what's the halacha lebalim? The meat goes to the owners. Ratzu mafshitin osan. They could take the skin off. Ratzu ochlum, so they could eat it. The skin goes with the meat. Al gabi oran. They could eat it with the skin. Aval ola, but the ola nemar ba. What does it say? You're supposed to remove the skin, and then you're supposed to cut it into pieces and burn it on the mizbeach. So now that means that the meat and the skin don't go together. So yachosh lo yehu hakohanim zakayin ba'ora. You might think that just like the meat always goes with the skin, the kohanim do not get the hide. Talmud Lomer, therefore the pasuk says, or hola sheri kriv. The kohanim get the hide. Okay, so that's the only reason. Otherwise, I don't need a pasuk because that's already understood. Okay, Rabbi continues this pasuk. The pasuk kohen hamakrivas olas es. Sorry, the pasuk was the hakohen hamakrivas olas ish, the kohen who brings the korban of the ola of a person, or haola, the hide of the ola sheri kriv kohen that he brings as a korban. Lo yiyeh, it will belong to him. So, what's the point of that? That is prat letzvul yom umechusar kippurim. That comes to tell me who is him. Only certain kohanim get it, not a kohen who's a tful yom. He does not get a hide. Also, somebody who is a mechusar kippurim. He is a zav, or he was a metzora, and he has korbanos still left to bring. He cannot get. He's not able to eat kodshim yet. He doesn't get a hide either. The onin, and onin also doesn't get a hide.
So he has a pending transaction, basically.
Sorry?
A pending transaction, basically.
He has a penny transaction.
Outstanding.
Oh, a pending transaction.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes, pending. That's mechusar kippurim. He has a pending transaction. It's correct. Lo yizku basar hu la'achila. Right? You might think, well, Hashehu la'achila. Say, well, he doesn't get a piece of the meat, right? Because why? Because he can't eat, right? He can't eat these korbanos, right? Yizku ba'or she'enu la'achila. He should still get a piece of the or of the hide, because that's not edible. That's not why he's getting the hide. So therefore, Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, "Lo yiyeh." No, only to this kohen, meaning prat le mechusar kippurim tzvul yom ve'onim. This kohen who doesn't get a portion of the meat because he cannot eat, also doesn't get a portion of the hide, despite it has nothing to do with eating. Same rules. The Tanakama. Now, the Gemara wants to know the Tanakama who learns this rule from. That the hide of the kodshim goes to the kohanim from the extra psukim. Nami tepa kli medina. Why do they need the psukim? After all, it's a good kal v'chomer. Why don't we learn it from that? So the answer is milsa dasi bekal v'chomer tarch v'kasav lakro. We've had this before, where sometimes something that could be learned from a kal v'chomer, we're going to learn it from a pasuk anyway. This way, in case you come up with a question to ask against the Kal V'chomer, the halacha still stands. So, okay, Rabbi Yishmael, Asher Hikriv Mayavidle. What does he do with the pasuk Asher Hikriv? He learns from a Kal V'chomer to include the other korbanos, so he doesn't need the pasuk Asher Hikriv. What does he do with it? So the answer is Prat Litvul Yom Umechusar Kippurim Ve'onin. So he says that's the pasuk that tells me that a kohen is a Tvul Yom, missing has pending transactions, as you just said, and also an Onin, he doesn't get the hide. Okay, but Tepuk Melo, yeah. Why doesn't he learn it from lo yiyeh like we had the other people do? So Rabbi Shmuel tameh. Rabbi Shmuel says I can't because I already used that pasuk for something else. Damar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Shmuel, Nemar ba'ola, it says by the ola lo yiyeh and Nemar ba'osham lo yiyeh. I have the word lo yiyeh twice, once by an ola, once by an osham, and that is to tell me a gzera shava. Malahalan atzmosov mutarin, just like the Kohanim are allowed to eat the bones of a asham.
How do you eat a bone anyways?
So you can use. You don't have to eat them, right? I said eat, but you could do for the gelatin. But you can use them for whatever you can make drumsticks out of it. You can do whatever you want out of the bone. Is usable. Is the point? It's not me'ilah, right? Because it's not part of the korban.
Right.
So therefore. Afkan, that's most of mutar, and so too by the ola, the bones are also permissible, which we might not have thought. Because why would the bones be okay by the asham? Because they're part of the meat given to the kohen, he can use it for whatever he wants. But the ola is burned on the mizbeach, so maybe the bones also have to be burned on the mizbeach. The answer is no. The bones do not. The bones are not considered part of what has to be burned on the mizbeach. The bones are acceptable to be used. And it's mufni. It's a gzera shava where both sides have to be extra. Why? Because we have learned there are different types of gzera shavas. If you have a gzera shava where the words are not extra, you can start asking legitimate logical questions and limit the power of that gzera shava. If you have them both extra, then you can't ask any questions. De'lo mufni, if this wouldn't have been extra excess, so then ikal meifrach, there would have been a fair question to ask. Mala asham shekain bisaro mutter, we would have said, look, an asham is different than an ola because in asham, the meat is permitted to be eaten by the kohen. That's very different than an asham where you can't eat the meat. So lo yiyeh kro yisera. So lo yiyeh is extra to tell me that even the bones by a korban ola is extra, and you can use them for whatever purpose you want. All bones are extra. Okay, that's what you use for lo yiyeh. So they didn't, but if we had a circumstance where the bones came off the mizbeach, but say they fell off after the meat was burned, you would be able to use them for whatever you want. We're at a new Mishnah. Yes. You guys are perfect. Not that the Mishnah is exactly like you walk. This is not the sort of Mishnah you walk right into the middle of. But, okay. Kol HaKadoshim, Mishnah says all of the Kodesh meats and things, she'ira behen psul kodem lehav shaitan. Let's say something happens to invalidate the korban before you remove the skin. Okay, so what's an example? The Kohen has in mind that he's going to do for pigol, right? The skin is still on it, but we know the korban's already possible. So what happens there? Then the Kohen does not get the hide of that animal. We're talking about the korban ola. The hide of the korban ola is a gift that the Kohen gets to keep. The rest of the animal gets burned on the mizbeach. Kohen gets to keep the hide. However, if the animal was not a kosher korban from the beginning, while the skin is still on the animal, then the Kohen does not get it. La'achar hefshiton, if, however, you've already skinned the animal, now the hide is already disconnected from the animal, and then you discover that there's a problem with the korban, orosehem lekohanim, then the Kohanim still get to keep the hide. Because at the moment of discovery, the hide is no longer part of the meat. So the Kohen, basically, the hide has to get disconnected from the rest of the korban before you find out that there's a problem. Once it's disconnected, it's gone, it's separate, and it goes its own way. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Skan HaKohanim. So Rabbi Chanina, who was one of the assistant Kohanim, Miyamai, during all my days in the Beis HaMikdash, Lo Ra'isi or Shiyotzu the Beis HaSreifa. I never witnessed one of the hides become disqualified and have to get burnt. Right? So we'll see why he says that. Amar Rabbi Akiva says, Midvarov, from what Rabbi Chanina, the Skan HaKohanim, is saying, Lamanu, we can learn from that, Shehamafshit es habachor, v'nimtza treifa, if somebody takes the hide of the skin off of a firstborn animal, and then, after it's already skinned, you open up the animal in order to start removing the inside organs, and you find that it has a blemish inside of it that makes it a treifa, and the animal's not kosher. Ye'osu hakohanim ba'oro, the Kohanim still get to keep the skin, because the hide is already separated by the time it was discovered. So even though this internal injury was always there, it doesn't matter when the injury occurred, it matters when you find out. That's what Rabbi Akiva wants to say. The Chachamim say to Rabbi Akiva, Ein lo ra'inu raya. Rabbi Chanina, the fact that he didn't see it proves nothing. Just means he didn't see, he didn't notice, he didn't know what he was looking for, right? He didn't see it. Ella yetzi lebeis sreifa. They disagree and they say that if they discovered that there was a problem with the animal from the outset, even after you removed the hide, then you have to, the hide is no good, quantum don't get it, you have to burn the hide. Okay. Kolsha, the Mishnah said before, okay, we're going to contrast this. Mishnah said before, Kolsha lo zacha mizbeach biv sara lo zachu akorim ba'ora. The moment to determine whether the Kohanim get the hide or not is the meat eligible to be burned on the Mizbeach? Now, in order for the meat to become eligible to be burned on the Mizbeach, you got to go through the whole process, right? You got to have done the slaughtering, you caught the blood, you brought the blood, you sprinkled on the Mizbeach. Once you sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach, that's when the meat is able to be burned on the Mizbeach.
You have to look for the mum as well, don't you?
You're going to look for the mumim as well. Yes, you can't burn them. You can't burn it on the mizbeach. So yes, you can check for mumim. So all of that has to have taken place already. If, however, something bad happens along that way, then the hide can't be given to the kohanim. Okay. Aval gav de'if shetila or kodem zrika. Even if the hide was removed before the sprinkling of the blood, you need to have a valid sprinkling of the blood. If something happens, you remove the hide, and then somebody drops the blood and it gets ruined. Okay. Well, now you keep the hide, even though you removed it already. That contradicts our Mishnah, right? So money, whose opinion is that? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. That's Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Da'amar, he holds, Ein adam meratza al ha'or bifnei atzmo. He says, right, that in a few pages we're going to learn him, and he's going to say that if you have blood and you have no meat, right? Let's say the meat is invalid. Can I throw the blood and have that hide belong to the Kohanim?
I would say not really, because what's my doing it without the meat?
So it's subject to dispute. So Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, yeah, if I throw the blood and the meat is already disqualified, the hide is valid and the Kohanim get to keep the hide. Okay, so now, Ema Seifa, then comes our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, if you find out that there's a psul, a problem with the korban, before, while the skin is still attached to the animal, then the Kohanim don't get to keep the hide. But after you've removed the hide, then the hide does go to the Kohanim. Which means that as long as you've removed the hide, it doesn't matter if you've sprinkled the blood. That hide is going to the Kohanim. So that's also the Rebbe. That's going according to Rebbe's opinion. Da'amar, he says, Hadam meratza al or bifnei. He says Hadam meratza al or bifnei atzmo, right? That he holds that if you sprinkle the blood, the meat without any meat available, the hide can be given to the Kohanim. So again, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says the blood, you need meat. You need the meat to be eligible in order for the hide to be eligible as well. That sounds like our first Mishnah. And this Mishnah sounds like it's Rebbe's opinion that regardless of whether the meat is fine or not fine, you can still keep the hide. Why? Because you can throw the blood without any meat and still have the hide be kosher. So Reisha, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Seifa, Rebbe. Okay? So it sounds problematic. Two Mishnayos, they're anonymous, and you're suggesting one of them goes according to one opinion, and one of them goes according to somebody else's opinion. And they don't even quote it as machlokas, just right out there. So the Gemara says, Rabbi, so Abai says, I will take a look at it like this. Mida Seifa Rebbehi. I'm going to start with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, like Rebbe, that says you don't need the meat in order to be able to make the hide kosher. I will go with that. Let's say they're both Mishnayos are going that way. Reisha Nami Rebbe. The Reisha is also going to Rebbe. Now, how come it says in the Mishnah that it has to be that the meat is eligible? That doesn't require, if Rebbe doesn't require the meat to be eligible, the answer is Mo de Rebbe she'ein hefshet kodem zrika. Rebbe agrees that it was just not common practice for the hide to be removed before they threw the blood. Think about how a korban is being brought, right? They slaughter it, they catch the blood. Now you got blood in a container. The process of skinning an animal, I don't know how long it takes. What do you think? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? It's got to take out longer than that, right? You imagine, right? You think it's more than that. I've got this blood in a bowl. How long is it going to take to start congealing, right? Right away. So the first thing they would do is take the blood to the mizbeach and sprinkle it. There was never practically a circumstance in which the blood wouldn't have been sprinkled. Therefore, it's irrelevant, right? If the skin had been, the point is, if the skin had been removed, the skin would be acceptable. But practically, the skin was never removed before the sprinkling of the blood. That's just a practical point. Okay, so therefore both Mishnayos are going according to Rebbe's point of view. When the Mishnah says, if the meat could be brought on the Mizbeach, then the hide is given to the Kohen, that's because practically the hide was never removed until after you've already sprinkled it. But true, the halacha would be that if in fact the hide would have been removed before you discovered the blemish, then the hide could be given to the Kohen even without the meat. Okay, that's how Abaye looks at it. Rava looks at it the opposite way. Midareisha Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, if the first part is Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, which means that you need the meat in order to be able to give the hide to the Kohen, so Seifa Nami, so the end is also requiring the meat. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Seifa Nami Rabbi Elazar, the end is also Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Umay Kodem Hefshit, what does it mean that you have to discover this if it's before the meat, before the skin is removed? Umay Achar Hefshit, and what does it mean after the hide is removed? Kodem sheniru lehefshit v'achar sheniru lehefshit. Meaning, before or after it becomes appropriate for it to be skinned, which is zrika, when you throw the blood. Once you throw the blood and the meat is now eligible, now you should skin the animal and you can give it to the Kohen. However, before that, right, the meat is not eligible. There's no point. The Kohanim can't get the skin yet. So therefore, they don't learn it as two separate opinions. Okay, now, let's talk about that. My Rebbe, my Rebbe Elazar Shimon. Now that we said there's an argument about whether you need the meat or not in order for the hide to be eligible to be given to the Kohanim, what is the source? What is that argument? So here it is. On the Mizbeach, correct. As an Ola on the Mizbeach, correct. So here we are. Tanya Brisa says, Rebbe says, Hadam Meratzah or Bifnei Atzmo. If you have Kodshe Kodshim, you have holy offerings, and you take the skin off, and there's no meat. The meat became puzzle, right? Let's say the meat went out of the Beis HaMikdash, went outside of the Azara area, okay, went outside of the courtyard area. Now it's ineligible. And if you throw the blood anyway, the hide is now acceptable and can be given to a Kohen. Ukeshu ima basar. We're not going to throw the blood outside the Beis HaMikdash. No, if you throw it outside, then that's not zrika, right? The blood has to be thrown properly, but if the meat is already ineligible and you throw the blood properly, then the hide can be given to Kohanim. Okay, that's how Rebbe holds. Now, ukeshu ima basar, right? If the meat is together with the hide, meaning they're still attached, so that nola babsul bein kodem zrika bein lachas zrika hareu kayotzebo. Then the hide follows whatever's with the meat. If the meat becomes puzzle, the hide becomes puzzle. The two are still linked together. The only way to unlink the hide and the meat is to separate the two of them. Once you separate them, then they have their own rules. That's how Rabbi looks at it. If they're together, then they're together. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says, "Ein adam meratzah or bifnei atzmo." Blood doesn't help hide. Blood helps the meat. So if you throw the blood, then the meat can be brought as a korban, can be burned on the mizbeach. The hide goes by whatever happens to the meat, regardless of whether they're attached or not. Ukeshuima basar, when it is together with the meat, nola b'psul kodem zrika, right? If there's a psul that happens to the meat before the blood is sprinkled, harehu kayotzebo, then it's the same thing. The hide is now nullified, is ruined. Achar zrika. Once, however, the blood has been sprinkled, hurtza basar sha'achas, if now that the meat was acceptable for an instant, so then yafshitenu ve'oro lakohen. Now you can take off the hide and give it to the kohanim. Now this is also a leniency that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is giving as well, because according to Rabbi, if the two are attached, they share the same fate. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, says once the meat is acceptable, even if they later become unacceptable, the hide is now acceptable. Once the meat was acceptable, it's always acceptable, even if they're still attached. So if the meat, while still attached, becomes puzzle, the hide can still be given to the Kohanim, since basically we don't look at the hide and the meat as a joined unit at that point. So let's suggest Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon and Rebbe are arguing in Lema de Rebbe Elazar Verbi Yeshua Kamiflagi. They're arguing in the same argument in a different brisa where Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar are arguing. What's that argument? Pasuk says, "Vasisa olosecha habasar v'hadam." You should do the korban ola, the meat and the blood. Okay, and now they're going to explain what's the purpose of this pasuk. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Im ein dam ein basar, im ein basar ein dam." The meat and the blood go together, right? If the zrika, if the sprinkling of the blood is not done kosher, then the meat cannot be brought on the mizbeach. Similarly, if the meat becomes puzzle, you cannot throw the blood. Right? So if the meat is not kosher, you cannot throw the blood. You need to have kosher meat in order to throw the blood, and you need blood in order for the meat to be eligible on the mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Dam afal pi she'ein basar." You can throw the blood even if the meat has gotten ruined. Right? The meat is gone. Go ahead and throw the blood anyway. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "V'dam zevachecha yishafech." The pasuk continues, says, "The blood of your korban you shall pour." So, im kain, if that's true, matam malomar, how do you explain the pasuk that says, "Vasisa olosecha basar v'dam"? You have to do the blood and the meat together. If it's not to tell me, madam bezrika of basar bezrika. Tell me a different rule. That just like the blood, you have to throw the blood against the mizbeach, the wall of the mizbeach, through the air, against the wall of the mizbeach in order for it to be valid. So too, when we threw the pieces of meat on the korban, on the mizbeach, onto the fire, you throw them through the air onto the fire, which teaches us. That is the old thing that we had learned, that there's a drop of airspace between the ramp and the mizbeach, right? There's a little bit of airspace. You got to throw the meat over that airspace into the fire, right? That's from this pasuk, right? Little bit.
If gravity lets it happen.
Yeah, but the Kohanim had good arms from we learned, right? They were very good. Kohanim had very good arms. So now, Lema, let's say, man de amar hurtza, right? The one who says that the hide can be valid despite the fact that the meat is not valid is Rabbi Eliezer. That's like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer said, even if you have no meat, go ahead and sprinkle the blood. Well, if you have no meat and you sprinkle the blood, what are you helping? The answer is the hide, right? The hide must be able to be kosher without the meat. So you can still sprinkle the blood and give the hide to the Kohen. Umandam are lowered, so the opinion that says sprinkling the blood is not going to allow you to use the hide because the meat is already ruined. So the meat and the hide go together. So that's Rabbi Yeshua. That goes like Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, who holds that once the meat is ruined, you can't throw the blood because it's not going to have any impact or any effect on anything. Well, it can affect the hide. No, it can't, because the hide is invalid once the meat is invalid. So aliba de Rabbi Eliezer. So we say no, it's not really within that dispute, because according to Rabbi Eliezer, kuliyama lo pligi, there's no argument, right? Everyone doesn't agree that the sprinkling of the blood, right? That is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the sprinkling of the blood is going to help the hide. That's what Rabbi Eliezer holds, right? Go ahead and throw the blood anyway, despite that you have no meat. Go ahead and throw the blood. Well, what's it helping? It's helping the hide. So everyone agrees that's what Rabbi Eliezer holds. Kipligi, the argument between the two views, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi's opinion about whether the blood is helping the hide or not, is aliba to Rabbi Yeshua, is all within Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. Man de Amar Lord, so the one who says that the blood is not going to help the hide, so then that's Rabbi Yeshua. That's the simple explanation of Rabbi Yeshua. He says, once the meat is ruined, don't bother throwing the blood because it can't help the hide. The hide is already ruined also because it goes together with the meat. Man de Amar Hurtz, the one who says, no, it's going to help, Amar Lach, he'll say to you, Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yeshua hasam elo bebasar delekap say de lo kohanim. That which we said, that you're not supposed to, that the throwing of the blood is not to be done, right? Because the meat is already invalid. Because then what will happen? You throw the blood, and now the owner has fulfilled his obligation for an offering. We say, well, there's no meat. Don't do that. So there, delekap seidel kohanim. If you won't, if the korban is not eligible for the owners, the kohanim are not going to lose by that, because the meat is already invalid anyway. So therefore, don't throw the blood, because, nobody really loses out on that. The kohanim are not losing the meat. So therefore, don't throw the blood. Let the owners bring a new korban. But the hide, If you're in a circumstance where now the Kohanim are going to lose this hide, so then afilu Rabbi Yeshua moda, even Rabbi Yeshua is going to agree. Go ahead and throw the blood. We don't want the Kohanim to lose that hide. So therefore, throw the blood, give the Kohanim the hide, and then the owners are going to bring another korban as well. So, therefore, even if according to the opinion that holds that the blood helps the hide, Rabbi Yeshua will say, in a circumstance where the hide wasn't invalidated, even if the meat was, go ahead and throw the blood anyway. Mida dehava adi avad. Because that's similar to a circumstance how how if the blood was thrown after the fact, meaning not. So let's say there's a circumstance where the blood's not supposed to be thrown, but nobody told the Kohen and he did throw it. Now what happens? Ditznan, we learned in a Mishnah. Nitma basar. Let's say the basar, the meat became tamei, or nifsal, or became pasal, or shiyatza chutz lekilayim, or it went outside of the courtyard. Rabbi Eliezer says yizrok, you throw it anyway, because he holds that you could throw the blood even though there's no meat there. Rabbi Yeshua says, lo yizrok, don't throw it. Mod Rabbi Yeshua, but Rabbi Yeshua agrees, she'im zorak, that if you did throw it, then hurtza, then the korban is valid. Okay, and so therefore we can see that Rabbi Yeshua holds that if there's a reason to throw that blood, i.e. that the Kohen can get the hide, we would go ahead and throw that blood. That would validate the korban. That's even if the meat has already been invalidated. That's correct. Because the meat is valid, for sure you throw the blood. Right? This is.
But we spoke also about where case where meat is valid, you throw the blood, and then afterwards it became invalid. This is where it is invalidated. Correct. Yes. Okay. The next the Mishnah said, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Sgan HaKohanim. Rabbi Chanina, the assistant to the Kohanim, he said that I never saw that a skin got invalidadated. Proves, he's trying to say, it proves that I'm right, that once the skin, while it's still attached to the meat, right, then it's not invalid. Then once the skin is detached, once the hide is detached from the meat, you can't invalidate the hide. Velo, what are you talking about? There's none. How can Rabbi Chanina say that? Hare param nisrafim u'seiram nisrafim. What about the hides of the bulls that were from the Yom Kippur offerings? That's burned together with the rest of the offerings. So the answer is he means no invalid ones were burned. The ones that were burned properly, that he of course saw. He saw properly burned ones. Hare kodem hefshev kodem zrika. So now, let's say there was a psul before the skin was removed and before the blood was sprinkled. So then in that circumstance, both Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, right? So, because according to him, the psul happened before the blood was removed, before the hide was removed, so it's going to invalidate it. And according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, it's before the sprinkling of the blood, so there should be a circumstance where the hide is burned, so cholutz kaminon. What he means is there was no skin that was ever removed that then was originally thought to be valid, that was then taken away as invalid. If it was still attached, you're right, then there could be an invalid offering. He's not saying there was no invalid offerings, but if it was once it was detached, he held that the invalidation was never an issue, and that holds like Rebbe's opinion. What about a circumstance where the hide was already removed from the animal, and they had not sprinkled it yet, they had not sprinkled the blood? Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. According to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon's opinion, since you need to sprinkle the blood in order to make the hide valid. So damer eina dam meratzah or b'fnei atzmo, because if the meat got disqualified before that, you would never throw the blood, in which case the hide would never be valid, and then you'd have to burn it. So Rabbi Chanina karebi sviralei. The answer is Rabbi Chanina holds like Rabbi. So he holds that you don't need to sprinkle blood. Once it's removed, the hide is valid, done, finished. V'boy say more, or else if you want, afilu tukma Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Maybe it does hold like Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Mo de Rabbi she'ein hefshet kodem zrika. But he would agree that it just was never in practice done that way. As we said, the hide was never removed before they sprinkled the blood. So therefore, they would always sprinkle the blood first. Therefore, there was never a circumstance where they had a loose skin that would be considered invalid. Okay, but what about v'ha'ika nimtzeis treifa b'bnei mayim? So he says, what about if I have a circumstance that you removed the skin, right? And now you open up the animal and you find inside the animal a blemish, a wound in the intestines. Okay, that was there before you took the skin off. So shouldn't the skin be invalid now? Shouldn't the hide be invalid? So kasavar nimtses trefa bivnei ma'ayim meratze. So he holds that no, even though you find the problem later and you are sure that the problem occurred before, once the hide is removed, it doesn't invalidate the hide anyway. So it goes by discovery, not by when the blemish happened, which is a big chiddush, right? Daikanami, you could see that also diktanik. It says Rabbi Akiva agrees. Midvarav, according to Rabbi Chanina, says Lamanu shamavshidas bechor v'nimtza treifa, that if you removed the hide from the firstborn animal and then you opened it up and discovered that it was a treifa, sheyeosu akonim b'ora, the kohanim get the hide anyway. Shmamina, you see Rabbi Akiva is making that very clear, that if the blemish was in existence before you removed the skin, but you didn't discover it until afterwards, that hide is still good. Well, okay. Well, then Rabbi Akiva is being Captain Obvious, right? What's the point of Rabbi Akiva saying what Rabbi Chanina says? So, ha kamash malan afilu begvulin. Rabbi Akiva is saying that this is even the case outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, I have a bechor. The bechor rule is that a blemished bechor belongs to the kohanim. Shacht it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's going to permit you to eat it. So let's say it dies before it was slaughtered. So now it has to be buried along with its skin, because it's considered a nevela. So now, if you have opened it up and you find it's a treifa, it should have been buried, and the kohanim shouldn't get the skin. The answer is it was blemished, so now the kohen does a shechita on it. Then he removes the skin. Now he opens it up and determines that it's treifa. He still gets to keep the skin, even though if the animal had died before the shechita, he would have had to bury the skin. He gets to keep the skin because it got removed before they discovered the problem. So that's Rabbi Akiva's point. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in Rabbi Yochanan, halacha ka Rabbi Akiva. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. That is in fact. But Rabbi Akiva lo Amar ella keshetiru mumche. Now this has to be a circumstance where an expert, a kohen, can't look at the animal themselves and determine that it's blemished because they get the money. So you got to take it to somebody, a rabbi first, who then says, this is a blemished animal, and now you, kohen, can keep it. But if not, so then that's not going to work, right? It has to be a circumstance where the animal is already eligible for the kohen to be able to keep. The hilchasa kedivrei chachamim, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Akiva. The halacha is like the chachamim who disagree with him and say that whenever the mum occurred, so then that's going to invalidate the hide. Okay, we'll quickly do the Mishnah just so we make sure to turn the page because we're getting a page and a half done every night. So, Paraman Nisrafim. If I've got bulls that are supposed to be the bull that the Kohen Mashiach brings, right? The Kohen Gadol brings if he makes a mistake, or the Kohen or the Beis Din makes an error, and those bulls are supposed to be brought. They throw the blood inside the Beis Hamikdash, and then the animal is burned. Usirim hanisrafim. Also the goats that are burned, right? That's for the goat for the avodah zarah when the community does avodah zarah. Also Yom Kippur. Bisman shein nisrafim k'mitzvasan. If they are burned according to the proper procedure, nisrafim bebeis hadeshen, then they are burned in the place called Beis Hadeshen, which was outside of Yerushalayim. The carcasses are taken all the way outside of Yerushalayim. Umetamin begodim. And the Torah tells us that the person who does the burning of the animal, they become tamei and their garments become tamei. They have to go to the mikvah, and they have to bring their garments to the mikvah as well. If, however, the animal becomes pasul at some point, and now it's not being burned properly, nisrafim bebeis habira. Then they can be burned like other kodshim. They get burned right there in the azara, right? Because they're right wherever they become pasul, that's where they get burned. They ain't on metamin begodim, and since they're not being burned properly, they don't create tumah for the person who's burning them. They're just being burned as non-kosher or offerings. Hayu sovlet osan bemotos. Okay, animals are big and heavy, so they take poles, right? And you got 4 guys, each one holding a pole. 2 guys in front, 2 guys in back. Yotu Arishonim, the first guys leave the Beis Hamikdash. Chutz lechomas azara, they get outside of the walls to the courtyard. V'achronim lo yatsu, but the back guys didn't leave yet. Harishonim et tamei begodim, the front guys already have their garments tamei. V'achronim einam et tamei begodim ad sheyetzu, but the back guys, their garments are not tamei until they leave the azara. Yatsu, once they leave, elu va'elu mitam begadim, then their garments are tummy. Rabbi Shimon says, Eina mitamim ad sheyutzas ha'or beruban. Rabbi Shimon says it's not when the animal leaves the Beis Hamikdash, when it leaves the Azara, it's when the animal is actually burned. They put it in the fire. When the animal is actually burned in the fire, that's when the people who put it there, their garments become tummy. Nita chabasar, if the meat is already singed and burnt up, so then ein hasorif mitam begadim. Then if somebody pokes the coals and moves around in there, that doesn't create any tumah because the mitzvah is already accomplished. Okay, that's a place for us to stop.
Oh yeah! Wow. Please.
Making an announcement.
Yeah, Ron, welcome.